Yeah, is that all right? We'll have our
Sure.
final speaker,
Sure.
surrogate for the Erin Murphy campaign. It's Representative Mary Kunesh-Podein.
Thanks.
Thanks, sorry about that.
And before
No
we
worries.
get going, can I just say a giant thank you
Oh.
for all your hard work?
Well, just to address what was referred to on Thursday, we had our education caucus, our education omnibus bill presented to us on the floor, and I had an amendment to the omnibus to eliminate the ending date for the equalizing funds that Minnesota puts towards our BIE schools. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, our four BIE schools are federally funded schools, and the federal government, of course, has never fully funded anything that they promised and have never kept all their promises. So these schools are getting about this much of the per pupil formula. So let's say it was about $1,700 that the federal government was giving each student in these BIE schools. Let's say all other public schools in Minnesota students were getting about $3,000 per pupil per item. So Representative Paul Thiessen a couple years ago recognized this inequity. Governor Dayton addressed it immediately and said, we're going to make up that difference. We're going to make it so that every kid in Minnesota is getting that same per pupil funding in order to equalize, in order to have equity in education. And so he has put that money forward every biennium, and it had to be renewed every 2 years. That money has made an incredible difference to our BIE schools. It has allowed them to create culturally relevant curriculums, bring in elders as mentors, so many things. And long story short, my amendment was to remove that every biennium. We had to renew that funding. Representative Sondra Erickson added an amendment to my amendment saying we need to make sure that they're doing everything that all our other public schools are doing and mandated in the legislature. As sovereign entities, in order to do that, there would have had to have been an agreement. I believe it's called an SEA, so School Education Agreement, between the tribes, between Minnesota. These are sovereign nations talking to each other, organizing together, creating agreements. That was never done. And so, first of all, her amendment was never really been able to be upheld legally. And second of all of those schools are already doing that. They are doing far above and beyond what Minnesota does because they have to meet the federal government expectations and as well as Minnesota. And I spoke with the principals, the superintendents, I spoke with Minnesota Education, Bureau of Education, all of those things, and they're saying they're doing that already. So this is really redundant, this is unnecessary. And when I brought this up, the representative stood up and made a comment, something to the fact of, well, if they're going to claim sovereign, why are they taking our money?
Why are they taking our money?
So that's when I really lost it on the floor and stood up, and I honestly do not really remember what I said. I reviewed it once and I just thought, oh, wow. There are a lot of other things I wanted to say, but, it really called to question, the representation of our Native communities as well as our kids and how the legislation is addressing Native issues. And so it was my pleasure to be able to do that. It was my honor to be able to do that as an educator, as descendant of folks, of relatives that were sent away to boarding schools, and just knowing that equity is making all the difference in our state. So thank you very much. And I honestly could not do it without the knowing support of our Native American caucus, knowing that they were there backing me up, and I get goosebumps when I say that because it's really made such a difference in myself as a legislator, knowing I have those folks there, and I'm looking forward to having allies in the legislature again. But now I'd like to speak to my friend Erin Murphy. Erin Murphy is running for governor. And it was 8 years ago that I met Erin, and from the very moment that we met, we really had kind of a special relationship. And she continued to ask me when I was going to run for office, and really inspired me to be the kind of legislator that she is. She's an educator herself. She's a nurse. She was the head of the nurses union, and as a union member myself, I know how hard she had to work. And when she came to me a year and a half ago and said, "Mary, I want to make a difference in Minnesota. Would you please, be part of my support team?" And I said, "Absolutely, I will." And so from that time, I have been supporting Erin, seeing all the good work that she has done in the legislature. She was at one time our majority leader, just constantly mentoring and encouraging women and people of color to run. And so it's really been my pleasure to work on her campaign. But if I could just read a few points, and I'm sorry I'm taking up more time than we should, but she says, I'm saying I'm here today on behalf of Representative Erin Murphy and her campaign for governor. Erin would love to be here herself, but she and the other candidates are doing a forum in Wilmer right now. She sends her greetings and asked me to say a few words on her behalf. Erin's campaign is going very well, and she's honored to have earned a recent endorsement from the DFL Latino Caucus, DFL Disability Caucus, and NARL Pro-Choice Minnesota. She's working really hard to build a campaign that can compete everywhere in our state, while also motivating and engaging Democrats who don't always vote, to ensure that we will win not only statewide, but also in tough legislative seats so that we can take back the House. It's really important we take back that majority in the House, and if we can in the Senate, and also in the governor's seat. Tim Pawlenty is a real challenge for any Democrat, but Erin has the strongest message against him. She beat him when he cut funding for general assistance medical care, and was the majority leader when the Democrats cleaned up the mess that he left behind and fixed our budget. Erin stands with Indigenous Minnesotans. She opposes Line 3, and she has been very vocal and very public about this. She opposes Line 3 and is committed to government relations, and respect for both the partnership and the sovereignty of our nation, of our Native communities. And so I would like to invite you to reach out and talk to Erin as a possible candidate and support. She's a wonderful person. She's got my support, and I would ask for your support as well. Thank you.